All right, it's Wednesday, August the 16th, and guess what? We don't have an August bass yet. And why don't we have an August bass? Because we went to the 127 yard sale and fooled around on the first weekend and didn't get to fish at all. And so here we are, middle of August, and we're going to go try to find us a bass on Laurel Lake. Jaw jacking. All right, we're on Laurel Lake. It's Wednesday, August the 16th, 2023. And so far, I've not got a keeper August bass. Caught several last Wednesday down here, but they were all short fish. They were all short of 12 inches. So we're trying to find one that counts. We're way up here in the river, almost up as far as you can go. We're at the junction of where City Dam and Lindcamp Creek come together. City Dam dams up Laurel Lake and makes another lake up above here. Just about inaccessible. City Utilities has kind of cut it off from the world. Afraid for somebody to get in there. But City Dam was the second dam built on this river. The first dam is can't even think of its name now. Dorothy Dam. Dorothy was built to water trains back in the, I guess, early 1900s, late 1800s. It's a real old dam. It's a low head, just like City Dam is here. But City Dam backs up, I don't know, not very much water, maybe 800-900 acres, 1,000 acres, something like that. It's minuscule and it's fairly shallow. Dorothy is smaller than City Dam. City Dam was built by City Utilities Corporation. It was built to water Corbin, and it was built quite a bit after Dorothy Dam was built. It was here when Laurel Lake was built. Laurel Lake was built in the middle 70s, and I've fished this pond since it was built. I don't ever recall, I'd been awful young, I don't ever recall fishing the river before the lake filled. But I did fish it the year that it was built. And I've fished it ever since. Laurel Lake has its ups and downs. I can remember when it was built, it was a fairly good place to fish. They well stocked it back then. Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife well stocked the lake. But it seemed like it never had a lot of big fish in it. The crappie in this lake died off, I think, in the winter of 77, 78. We had a freeze, and it froze over the lake. It froze it over enough to where people were down at 312 Bridge. They were driving Jeeps into the lake and driving across the lake on Jeeps on top of the ice. But when that freeze happened, I don't know what it did to the crappie, but it killed them off, and they didn't really survive very well. They were a few here and there, but not many at all. The bass, generally, growing up, they ran small in this lake. 12 inches was the norm. Less than 12 inches, probably 10 inches. Back then, I believe the limit back then might have been 10 fish, and it might have been 10 inches is a limit. And I can remember when they changed it to 5 or 6 fish. I'm sorry. It's 5 fish most states. Kentucky's 6 fish. And I can remember when they lengthened that limit to 12 inches. And then quite a few years later, this would have been in the middle 90s, I guess. They changed the limit down here to 15 inches on a largemouth, 18 inches on a smallmouth. And I'll be honest, I thought, man, there ain't enough 12-inch fish in this lake to make a limit. Back then, guys were bringing in 5 and 6 fish limits, and they wouldn't, 6 fish wouldn't weigh 12 pounds on a limit. I can remember many a tournament back in the late 80s and the 90s being won on 7 or 8 pounds of fish on a full limit. But they brought that bigger limit in, and I thought, well, that'll never work. There'll never be no fish down here. And what that did, that caused the anglers, bass anglers, caused them to target spotted bass, because there is no size limit on spotted bass. You can keep whatever size spotted bass you catch down here. And so people started targeting spotted bass to fill their limits out and to carry into tournaments, because frankly, finding 18-inch smallmouth and 15-inch largemouth just wasn't happening. And so got a little bit hung here, but what that did biologically, that kind of cleaned the spots out. I know I went several years down here and didn't catch one. Back in the early part of the 2000s, those spotted bass were about gone out of this lake. And when those spotted bass disappeared, that left an excess of bait fish. It left an excess of food, and it caused the smallmouth and the largemouth. It caused the sizes on those fish to rise dramatically. And we started seeing in the spring, we started seeing tournaments on 5 fish with over 20 pounds. I remember one year it seemed like it took 28 pounds to win one of the spring tournaments down here, and that was incredible. And the difference, if you're not familiar with the difference in those 3 species of fish, the largemouth, the smallmouth, and the spotted bass. The spotted bass and the smallmouth are what are native to these waters. Largemouth were introduced here. Largemouth did not exist here naturally. They started stocking them when they built Lake Cumberland, and you started seeing largemouth bass up in this part of the country. But they were an introduced fish. They came from the more northern lakes, the slower moving waters. But the difference biologically in those fish, the spotted bass take a lot more food than a largemouth per pound. So if you take a 12-inch spotted bass, it takes approximately 8 times the amount of feed to bring that bass up to a 15-inch spotted bass than it does to bring the largemouth up to a 15-inch bass. And so the spotted bass being the most plentiful in this lake after it was built in the 70s and up through the 80s up till they changed the limit. The spotted bass by far were the most plentiful in this lake, and what they were doing, they were eating up all the food. They were stressing the food source, the little minnows and the bugs and the crayfish and all that kind of thing. The spotted bass were eating them all, and the largemouth weren't getting enough to eat, and they couldn't grow, couldn't expand. And so once you got the spots out of the way, then those food sources exploded. It also helped matters really. The Department of Fish and Wildlife doesn't really like this. They call it bucket biologists. But people started dumping alewives in this lake. They bring them in here for bait fish from parts unknown up north. And they bring those alewives in here, I guess fishing for crappie or something, or not crappie, but walleye. But they bring those in here and they dump them out. Well, now we've got some ungodly large schools of alewives, and they do make a good food source for smallmouth and largemouth bass. There are times here in the evening days, even in the summer, there are times that those fish will come up, the shad and the alewives, and they'll come up and you can about walk across this water on bait fish. So they've got plenty to eat now. And this lake does produce some big fish. You know, my game, this bass a month deal is my game, my rules. And I've been trying to catch my bass a month on a crankbait and have since September of 2012. And when you're in a deep lake like Laurel, Laurel is far deeper than what I like to fish. I really like to fish the Tennessee River, Watts Bar, Guntersville, Chickamauga. Most of them Tennessee River lakes, I like to fish them. And you get on the Tennessee River, I tell Robert Blue all the time. Robert talks about catching fish 45 and 50 feet deep on spinner baits, and I tell him if you do that in Watts Bar, you're going to have dynamite and have to explode you a hole to get that deep, because most of Watts Bar Lake 10-15 feet deep or less, quite a bit less. The only time you get any real depths out the channel, well, Laurel Lake at the dam is something like 250 feet deep. Laurel Lake is deep. It's like Cumberland. It's got some shallow spots, but it's deep. And in the summertime, those bait fish, the shad and the alewives, they get out in the deep water and they go down deep. And they're down there playing around, and they're playing around in 35 or 40 feet of water, maybe deeper, 45 feet. And that's where them fish are. Them fish are going to be where the bait fish are. They ain't going to be up here shallow in great numbers and in great size. But this is the way I like to fish, and that's just part of me. We're coming up on City Dam. I'm gonna fish this moving water. Growing up as a kid, I fished the Cumberland River. That's what I grew up fishing. And when I say Cumberland River, I'm not talking about Lake Cumberland. I'm talking about the river from Cumberland Falls up up 92, up above Williamsburg. Probably the most experience I've got's probably from around Faulkner Bend down to the 204 bridge down in that part of the country. But I grew up fishing running water. Some of the guys used to kid me back when I was fishing tournaments. They'd say, "Where are you going?" I said, "Where the waters are running." And I'd get a place like Douglas, and I'd go up till I got to the running water up in the river. We've had some rain here recent, but not a whole lot. And this water's a little bit stained, but it's still good. A lot of times you'll come up here and there'll be a lot of trash floating, logs and Volkswagens and water heaters and whatever everybody's throwed in the bank, the river. And that ain't really good. It's hard to fish. You stay hung up all the time. But right now it's not that bad. This big structure in front of me, that used to be the pump house for city utilities. That's where they pump the water out of the lake. They pumped it out of City Dam up there. The Laurel Lake is owned by the Corps of Engineers, federal government. And city utilities several years back wanted to put a pump in Laurel Lake because it's cleaner water, it's deeper. When you get into the summer and you get into droughts, there'll be times that this water over this dam will stop because the water just gets too low and it don't flow over the dam anymore. Right now it's still flowing, but and I actually hear that pump running, so they are pulling some water out of here. And I can see the current going in there, so they are pulling a little bit of water out of here. But the long and short is the federal government told city utilities that if they wanted to put a pump into Laurel Lake, the federal government was going to charge them, I think it was $10 million as a fee. That wasn't the cost of building the pump, that was just a fee to be able to do it. And city utilities refused to pay that, and they stayed on this river. They stayed above up in City Dam, pumping that water for years. And then they wrecked a train load of chemical in London. And when they did, when that car turned over, it dumped the chemicals into the Laurel River. And those chemicals were coming downriver. Well, Barberville city utilities, before the federal government got so persnickety and wanting so much money to be able to draw water out of this lake, they had already put a line into Laurel Lake, and it runs right through this country, right across here, and run right down 25E and runs over to Barberville. Well, city utilities tied on to that. If you look, I'm looking up there, I can barely see that bridge over on also what I call 25E. That's before it gets over to 312. But we're just going to be up here seeing if we can find something sitting here in this current. Current's often a good place to find fish. When you get up here against this dam, you don't want to get your boat up there too close. What happens, you get in a current and it'll suck your boat over there to the dam, and that water come over in here and sink you. But we're safe enough out here. This Lowrance trolling motor might or might not get us out of here. I don't know. But I've known fellas to swamp a boat here. I've known of several. That's drowned to get close to that thing. Too close. You can see they all kinds of sticks and logs sitting on top of it, just ready to come over any time. Right now, it's not flowing as hard as normal. So, you know, right now, them logs will stay up there for the most part. They come down, it's not going to be a whole big deal. But I just come up here, thought I'd check this out since we come all the way up in the river. Thought we might get lucky and get a smallmouth up here staged up trying to find some food. We're throwing right now we're throwing a Mama J. That's a jaw jacker Rob come out with about 5 or 6 years ago. It's named after his mother. That's a 1.5 body with a square bill. This particular one, if you look at it, it's got a circuit board lip. Circuit board will go a little bit deeper. Boys, we got a fish. We got a fish. We got a fish. Right there. Right there we got Mr. August, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get away from this dam before I try to take his fish off. There are some stuff floating here, and I don't want to get tangled. I have to work on this fish a little. The boys, that right there makes another month. And that is Mr. Brownfish, Mr. Smallmouth. Come on, hook. Come out of that fish. Boys, that hook right there is in the tough part of that fish's jaw. That fish wasn't coming off. There we go. Popped her right out. Right there we got him. That is August. We'll take a picture with this other camera here. Right there we go, folks. That's August 2023. Smallmouth, Laurel Lake, right here at City Dam, right in the current. Put him back, let him be free. Got a text from the War Department here. There we go. Well, All right, we'll get back up there and see if we can get us another. Most of y'all that follow me know that I do this bass a month thing. We've completed 16 years, or I have, of catching at least one bass each month. Since September of 2012, I've caught at least one bass a month on a crankbait. Now, it's made me become a little bit one-dimensional in that I fish crankbaits a lot, but old boy ain't forgot how to do everything. I fish a lot of other stuff too, spinner baits, jackhammers, soft plastics, frogs, top water. But my first priority is to catch my crankbait bass on the month. How I got started in that, in this bass a month quest, Sam Ballou. I don't know how many of you know Sam Ballou. Sam passed away several years ago. But Sam, at the time he passed away, I believe he had 38 years in several months. He caught a bass a month before he passed away. But Sam had 38 consecutive years. Now his brother Robert, I would assume, is approaching 50 years. I don't know exactly how many, but Robert's in the high 40s or 50 years one of catching at least one bass a month. And Sam kind of encouraged people to do that, and there were a bunch of people around Corbin that got into this bass a month. Everybody had to catch them a bass a month. And folks, I tell you, when you get up in January and it's 5 degrees out and you got to go fishing because you got to catch that January bass, son, that's tough. Most people don't know what it's like to crank one of these bass boats up to about 60 mile an hour and it's 5 degrees out, snowing. But I've done it, and a lot of other people has. I know Robert has, and I know Sam sure did. But Sam, back years ago, I remember fishing a tournament on Norris Lake, and I can't really remember who Sam was fishing with, but Sam had heart surgery to replace a valve in his heart. He had open heart surgery, and he scheduled that open heart surgery so that he could catch a fish in February and get to go in March and catch him another one for March. Sam scheduled his surgery around fishing. And I think Robert's done the same thing, to be honest. But I picked up on that bass a month and started that quest on my own. And the first time I made it 6 years. And I got up in December one year and I caught a little bitty bass. It was the only fish I caught that year in December. I only got to go one time in December. And if you look on bassmaster.com, search Skip Walden, you'll find the article about it, and you'll find a picture of that bass. Don Barone wrote that about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, about this quest. But I had made a decision on my bass a month that my bass had to be at least 12 inches long for me to count it. And like I said, that was December's tough because you got all these Christmas parties, and every time you turn around, somebody wants you to go somewhere to some kind of Christmas shindig. And I tell a lot of people a lot of times, you know, what weekend of the month are you going to leave open for me to go fishing? And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand the dedication it takes to keep up this bass a month streak. But that December, the only weekend I got to go, the only day I got to go, that was the only fish I caught. I caught it on a jigging spoon, and it was about as long as that jigging spoon. It was one of them I guess a 3/4 ounce jigging spoon. And but that was all she wrote for that streak. Well, then I started back the next month in January, and I caught fish on New Year's Day. I was out there, and it hit about 12 degrees out on North Lake, and I ain't fooled around with it since. I've had some close calls. I had one, I think it was in February one year. It was either January or February 1. And it's January, so it was cold. Every place I went to was froze over. New Year's Day, it was -1 degrees, and I was on Watts Bar breaking ice with a bass boat. I pulled a Robert Blue stunt. I backed it out on the ice, backed the trailer out till it broke through the ice, and I got the boat in the water. But that January, that ice hung on for about 2 weeks, and everywhere I went, I was running into ice, and like I never caught a fish. I think it was the last day of January that year. I was on Watts Bar, and I fished all day and didn't have a thing. That ice over had really messed with the fish in this country that year. They just weren't acting right. And I'll be honest, it got to be about 4:30, 4:45 in the evening, and you know, that is January. That's almost dark, and I'd give up. I'd fished all day long. I'd fished since about 30 minutes before daylight, and I'd wound the crankbait all over Watts Bar Lake, everything I knew to do, and hadn't had a lick. And so we got floating there. But anyway, I'd put my rods up. I'd done opened the rod boxes and put my rods back in the rod box. And I was gonna go ahead and go home, defeated. And I looked up at a riprap bank. There's one of them homeowners down there put in a brand new riprap bank. And I looked at that, the sun was hitting it just right, and the wave action was hitting it just right, and I said, there had got to be a fish in that riprap. And I admit I didn't catch it on a jawjacker that time. I caught it on a bandit, 400 bandit. But I went over to that riprap bank, and I think I throwed that bandit about 4 times and caught me about a 5-pound largemouth. Kind of saved my tater, I guess you'd say.